Next, we have Sarah Raviani. Sarah is a visiting fellow at the National Union for Democracy in Iran. Thank you so much for being here today, Sarah.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here and to be amongst so many leading voices in the fight for freedom in Iran. I want to start by sharing a little bit about myself. I'm a first-generation Iranian American, born and raised in Dallas, Texas. I come from a very, very political family, and I oftentimes growing up, we would sit at the dinner table and talk about politics. This was the norm for our family. I myself stayed very politically uninvolved just because it was something I was never interested in. I wanted to remove myself from the trauma. I wanted to live my own life and just be a regular American. And I, for a long time, stayed very, very inactive. And that changed in 2022. And I'll never forget being at home that night at dinner. And my dad said, Sarah, there's an Iranian woman named Masa, and she was your age. She was killed. And I looked at it in his eyes that night, and I could tell something was different this time. And I remember thinking to myself, it's just another woman. This happens all the time. We saw Neda Agha Sultan, which, we are at the 15-year today anniversary of her murder. We saw so many women in Iran throughout the years being persecuted and brutalized. And I thought, what's going to change this time? But following 2022 was something that was a revolution in all of our hearts. And it started in all of our homes across the entire world, globally. Iranians rose up demanding change. And it was one of the most hauntingly beautiful times of my life to feel so connected to Iran for the very first time. And I saw those young kids that were my age rising up in the streets and demanding change. And I knew that I had to do more. So it started off for me as, very casual advocacy turned legislative advocacy. So throughout the year of 2023, I was traveling to and from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast here in Washington, D.C., where I live now. Because I work as a visiting fellow for National Union for Democracy in Iran, but we championed legislation to hold the Islamic Republic accountable. And we just passed a bill, the 21st Century Peace Through Strength Act, which included funding for Israel and also tighter sanctions on the regime in Iran. Iranians across America put aside their religious differences, their political differences, all of our backgrounds. We set everything aside and we focused on a common goal, which was advocating for stricter sanctions on the Islamic Republic to hold them accountable for supporting terrorism and for human rights abuses. So when October 7th happened, it felt like 2022 all over again. I woke up that morning very, very early. It was around 5 a.m. And for around an hour, I sat on social media as I watched videos of Hamas hunting down Israelis. And I remember calling my mom. I was at my parents' house and I called my mom over to my bedroom and I just had her lay down with me and we were crying and just in shock because, we had been advocating for so long and trying to educate lawmakers on the dangers of the Islamic Republic, and it felt like it had fallen on deaf ears. On October 3rd, Armita Garavand, a young woman in Iran, was brutally assaulted and was in a coma. By October 7th, the regime, via its proxies, launched a brutal attack on Israel. And I was honestly scared because when I see Iran trending in the news, it's usually never a good thing. And I thought, oh my gosh, are people going to think that Iranians hate Israelis or hate Jews? But then by October 10th, the hashtag Iranians Stand With Israel was trending. And the Iranian people globally stood up with the people of Israel against the terror that Hamas had committed. And it was beautiful to see because for all of 2022 and 2023, the Israeli and Jewish community are basically our only allies. They were the only people that stood with us as we were demanding change and demanding freedom. And so to see this unity was in one of the darkest moments was something beautiful that came out of this very, very awful situation. By October 11th, I was back in Washington, D.C., and I was on Capitol Hill, and I was advocating for stricter sanctions. And the dialogue had completely changed. For the first time, we had lawmakers that were actually listening and actually had an interest in hearing about what the Islamic Republic was doing. And it felt amazing to be heard for the very first time and to feel like finally someone was listening. So in all of the madness and all of the chaos and all of the abuse that the Islamic Republic perpetrated, there was something beautiful that came out of it. And my heart really does go out to the Jewish and Israeli communities. There were many Iranian Jews, Iranian Israelis who were murdered and killed on October 7th. And it just showed us that no matter where we are in the world, the Islamic Republic is a threat to us all. So we have to continue standing together and demanding freedom and demanding change, because a free Iran will benefit every single one of us.